clap, as it were. Well, good morning to you, Jesse. How's the weather where you are?
The weather where I am, we got about 8 to 10 inches of snow the other day. So I am in Boston, Massachusetts, and but it's good for the kiddos, so it's all good.
We're cold. We're cold by California standards, so occasionally I have to put a top on. It's difficult. It's hell. It's hell, really, Jesse.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get a cold wind coming straight through here. I can relate to how you feel with 8 to 10 inches of snow.
Yeah, I know. I know. Again, I think I've said it to people. For those of you who don't know, I lived in Washington D.C. for close to 15 years, and I worked for the federal government, and I would take the freezing cold over the heat that is in that it is DC. It may be the hottest place in the United States at times with the humidity. I've been in New Orleans. I've been to Death Valley, whatever. There's something about that DC summer heat. But anyway, that's not why people are here today.
No, but it is interesting actually. At some point, people in their DV journey have to choose where they're going to live, and I often tell people. And also, why are they going through the DV journey? And so for many people, I'm very aware that some people are running away from very difficult situations, right? Economically or security-wise. For me and for my wife, it was the weather. That's why we wanted to be in America. And, it sounds so trivial in a way, but, we had a good life in the UK. We would have been fine there. We could travel around Europe, no problem. But it's not quite like, America. The weather's great, and there is more business opportunity here too. So
that does actually bring up a good point and a lead in, because with our clients, we have this Telegram chat that's private, where we can engage sometimes in questions and other things, but also about where do you plan to live, and thinking ahead, and thinking not this experience is so traumatic for the diversity visa selectees, that sometimes thinking positively about where I'm going to live, what I'm going to do, the opportunities for your children, or maybe for your parents to come, and I think that helps to maybe alleviate some of the what I see as just trauma. And again, I actually maybe I have a question for you to start, because a lot of the community out there is struggling to find a way to, I think, control something. And one of those mechanisms is sending emails, or unlocking, or moving to transfer. What is your like brass tacks on any of those kind of mechanisms to cope? Like, do they work? When should you do that?
Yeah, it's very understandable. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. People want to be able to understand the process and control the process, and they assume that people such as myself or you can say, okay, do this and this will happen. And that used to be the case prior to DV 2020. I could give advice like that. I would say, here's what will happen. Your DS-260 will be processed at the latest by this time, by December. By December and January, all the DS-260s were processed. So when someone said, for example, in February, okay, I'm now going to input my DS-260 for the first time, I could say, okay, so your number's current. You're putting your DS-260 in. It'll be completed in 3 weeks, and you'll be scheduled for this month, April, or whatever it was, right? And it was a reliable process. It was a predictable process. And now people are trying to control it. And the back and forth argument about how cases are processed, for example, is absolutely not unclear. It's absolutely not a mystery. But people want to latch onto the things they can control. They can control their case number. They can control when they send the DS-260. What they are not able to control is how long KCC takes to process the damn thing, right? And they're not able to understand it. So they latch onto other things they want to control, like, okay, I can see my embassy only took 15 cases. This other embassy took 150. I'm going to move over there. Well, no, that's not necessarily your best. You may not be wise to try and move over there. You could find there's travel problems. You could find a war kicks off in the Eastern Europe, and and all the embassies in the sort of immediate vicinity start to close down, or you don't know what's going to happen, right? And so jumping around and trying to control this thing is really quite difficult. And I struggle at times telling people to say, just wait another month and see how it goes on, because they're very aware that a few people are getting visas, and they're all scared. I get it, and you get it for sure. But I personally don't think people need to, I think people need to give the process a little bit of time, let the lawsuits, develop, see what happens. And there is time. We're only in February, right? So
I know. I think people get mad at me, or I know my clients get mad at me, and that's okay, because I sometimes put in our chat the date. I'll write like February 25th, February 26th, because but we don't have time. I mean, we have time and we don't have time. I mean, it's this difficulty of positioning. But I guess maybe in a role reversal today, let me ask you another question, because what I've seen anecdotally is this. I think KCC sends out these cursory or rote emails that don't reflect the reality of what they've done to the 260. And so a lot of times people will say, well, I'm still in processing. And my theory is you may or may not be. They're just sending you an email. I actually think it's more of embassy capacity and them kind of not telling you exactly what's happening on the ground. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah.
That's my theory. If I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong.
Okay. What does it mean? Because I actually, that is a pet theory of mine.
Okay, it's not right. I promise you, it's not right. So you're right in identifying the lack of transparency in the process is frustrating, and there is certainly an element of some of the template emails being sent out in error. Right, they're incorrect template emails, or they're template emails that should say something and they actually are not helpful. Like you've been scheduled at literally the thing says you've been scheduled at XXX interview on XXX date. And it's because somebody sent out the email, the template email, without updating the template, right? Now, now, were they wrong in sending that particular template email, or did they make a mistake in not updating the template? We don't know, and so it's confusing. But I strongly believe the emails that say you're processing, what they mean is you're not processed yet, right? It doesn't mean that there is actual activity going on in the background. And it's nothing to do with the embassies, because the embassies don't know anything about your case until you've actually been allocated and sent to them, right? Mm-hmm. Two things, allocated and sent to them, the 2NL. Until then, the embassy literally has no idea of your name and your date of birth or anything else. They've got no information on you. There's no technical way how they could influence your case. So no, they're not. It's not an embassy feedback loop. It's a backlog thing. I've explained this backlog thing before, right? So
let me ask you another question, because now I'm curious, because if you have people who've submitted the 260 and maybe they did it early or maybe not, and under the pilot program, you would think that there's really not a whole lot of processing to do, because they said, we're not gonna. It's really a matter of receipt and spit it out. So why would someone who, I guess let's take two classes of individuals. Why would some individuals who've submitted their 260, let's say in August, still be in processing? And then why would someone post under the pilot program still be in processing?
Right. So firstly, when they put out the pilot program, they said what you just said, that if you submit your DS-260, you'll then be ready for an interview, right? And Neil, what's his name? Miles did a declaration, I think it was in the Rye lawsuit in December, saying the same thing, saying that that's what they do, that the DS-260 is submitted and you're instantly ready. Now, we know that's bullshit, because there is some processing that's going on. And just the other day, in the Good Luck case, there was a new declaration, And in that new declaration, they've inserted the third step, which is, we know what it is, but there is processing, but they've admitted that you have to submit your DS-260. They talked about in that processing, because it was good luck, they talked about the documents process, but they also said, and KCC have finished their pre-scheduling processing. This was a new phrase. They'd never put that in any of the declarations.
Right.
Now, I've always known there was processing, and we were able to sort of, understand the length of time it took to do that processing. And we even know what the processing is. It's background checks, right? So we know that there is processing. But why does it take 8 months? No, it bloody well doesn't take 8 months to do the processing, and they're not actively processing even on the more difficult cases. So, and it's a great question. So I want to just take a minute or two on this. In the old days, prior to the DS2, so the document procedure, the DS-260s were submitted in May, and there was a backlog situation until about December, right? So people in October, November, December would find that they're not being scheduled according to their case number. And the answer for that was, well, it's because your DS-260 is processing. And then by about January or February, we could reliably say, okay, to someone who inputs their DS-260 that late, you'll get that process back within 3 weeks. And because you can get on the next bus, which is the 2NLs that are sent just after the VB, we could predict almost precisely, almost 100% reliably, exactly when they would be interviewed, because they had just submitted their DS-260 and they were current. And we could say, okay, it'll take 2 to 3 weeks of your processing. So we know the actual processing takes 2 to 3 weeks. There's certainly some cases that take longer, but it takes 2 to 3 weeks. Now, in previous declarations, Miles Morgan has also talked about, we can open 7,000 cases a month, right? He's actually given numbers on those in some of the lawsuits, 7,000 in this month, 5,000 in this month. They talk about opening, not processing, opening. So what they do is they open the cases. Some will hit red flags, like your name matches someone on the no travel list, or you're a rocket, nuclear weapons rocket scientist, right? And so there's a reason to do a little bit of a deeper dive on your case, and that will take a little bit longer. That's understandable. Whereas there are other people who can go through very, very quickly. So when their case is opened, their DS-260 is processed almost immediately. Now, we know this to be the case, right? So we have people now who have submitted their DS-260 in September and even October, and they're already being scheduled. Whilst we have other people who submitted in May and June, and they're still waiting wait a few weeks for processing, right? Yeah. So the problem is that when you get opened, you go into this backlog scenario of whatever background checking there is. The background checking is the slow part. And it becomes frustrating to people because they can't control, they can't understand, they don't know what's going on, they don't know why they've had to wait 8 months. And they're questioning, does it really take 8 months to go through my DS-260? The answer is no. It doesn't take 8 months to go through the DS-260, but it takes 8 months for them to get to your case because they're doing other cases and they're opening cases, and the ones that are quick get processed real quick.
Yeah, right. And let me just put on my litigator hat, because this is what you've just described with the secret information that gets kind of updated as we go, but no one really gets that information unless you're privy to that declaration. I read them, I can see them, but those that are not up to date on the lawsuits, and nor should you be, it speaks to why I included a count, or in our lawsuit, you have to make specific claims and you list them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And everyone says, obviously the first defendant in our lawsuit is the Kentucky Counselor Center. And, the reason I did that is because what I see in what you've just explained is a completely arbitrary and capricious situation where there is no line, right? Right. There is no line. There's no rule of reason, right? There's no method that they've described, whether it's because the only thing that's outwardly facing is the only thing that matters as far as I'm concerned. You can't put it in a declaration and say, well, that's the way it should be. You have to put it to the public. And the pilot program instructions do not reflect the reality.
Right.
So like, that's why it's not just a delay case for me. It's your situation is nuts. Okay.
Yeah.
That's illegal. That's a legal term. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why I have no problem with, sitting there and saying to my clients, they want me to, and I say, well, it's an arbitrary and capricious. And they're like, no, I want to know. And I'm like, yeah, that's why we're suing, because I want to know, because you deserve the right to know, because you're right. If I can't explain it to you, they can't explain it. And that's hard to accept. But and I try to explain this to clients and others who want to, engage with us. If it's an arbitrary and capricious situation, that means it's inexplicable. So asking me to explain it to you is like asking me to, defend the government. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, they shouldn't be able to do it, because what they've subjected these selectees to, especially this year with, this pilot program, we're front loading, we're going to take a full pool of selectees based on our expectation of delivering. And then the bait and switch, as I call it, it just represents the basis for our lawsuit. This year is different. This is what we're doing. And they're only backing themselves into a corner. Now, that's only one part of it, because the other part of our case in particular, of course, is, the waste from October until, I guess, now and ongoing, has really jeopardized any possibility of a distribution or issuance of 45,000. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's really in jeopardy. And I've told our clients and those that have maybe heard this before, I said, listen, if you want to know about the strength or weakness of our lawsuit, you can go to the monthly, find the immigrant visa issuances at your own consulate and worldwide, and you'll see that they're probably at a really pre-pandemic pace. And as if they continue on that path or exceed it, right? If they hit 600 and 700 immigrant visa issuances this year, and they're at 15,000 diversity visas, the strength of our lawsuit increases.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. Okay.
Yeah.
And why do I say that? Because if you do the math, they generally track 9% of all immigrant visas are allocated to diversity visas. It's a pretty straight line, which 2016 and even in 2020, and I said this before, even in 2020, I think it only went down to 8%. And I know the lawsuit played into that, or lawsuits played into that and made that number come up. But even there, that wasn't necessarily held to be good faith. And so let's look at this. Let's just tie a bow on this and connect the dots. If the Department of State is championing, the cause for immigrant visas, but not diversity visas, and they do 600 to 700,000, and we're sitting here in August and they're at 15,000. I just don't think that any judge is going to look at that and say, that's good. That's good enough.
Yeah.
And so I can get into why the government feels that they've made this kind of change in position. Or we can talk about ways where I think this will go. But, I just wanted to say that, there's a couple things at play. And, there's the KCC pilot crash. I've called it like a crash. Like they had a pilot go up, right? They did this pilot program and it crashed. It didn't work. And they also, I think, we'll find out, but that they ignored the diversity visa program when they should have been front loading it. Like they said. And then, of course, we have consulates. And again, if I name one, if I leave a consulate, I've actually had to do this. If I leave a consulate off when I talk and I jump like 3 or 4 and I leave one off, I'm now anti that, or I'm ignoring my client.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't want but I will put a couple out there. But
why do you never talk about this one?
Yeah, exactly. They're like, you don't defend this content.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, of course I do. So I'll leave. But what questions do you have today?
Well, there are questions lining up.
Yeah.
Let me just can I put a little bit on your bow on your statement? Couple of clarifications. I agree with you. The process is arbitrary. Arbitrary is not the same as random. And people need to understand that, because people are going to assume that, therefore, processing is random. It will feel random. It's not. It's just not how it should be, because the law says you're supposed to be processed. You're supposed to have the lottery rank number. Your case number is supposed to give some sort of privilege or priority, and that's not what's happening, and that's a problem. So that's the thing. And obviously making more cases current than really can be current, giving, Africa, let's say 50,000, gives the impression that everybody under case number 50,000 will be happy. They won't be, because they're not going to issue enough visas, right? So, it creates an unfair situation, which is actually anti to the law. And it's not a good thing. Anyway.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take on that, and I absolutely appreciate your comments on that. Thank you for that. So let's grab a couple of these questions and try and satisfy things. Oh, I did want to just say, did you see the discussion about the Sydney consulate? By the way, there's a projection of May 30th as being the end of the construction period, and an assumption, therefore, on June 1st everything will be happy. I'm not sure that's true.
I talked to I had a Zoom. So I have these Zooms with our clients, and I had our case is Preston. I had a call with the Preston clients on Friday night and Saturday morning in Sydney. I'm learning the times, and we talked about that. And I said I actually would. I don't think that, because the government has to answer in our cases in April. I don't think they're going to want to go in there and say, we'll get to it in June. So I actually call me. I'm doubtful that that's going to be good enough. I actually think we'll maybe could see some movements. Now, what could the government do? Well, they could issue interviews for June, right? But they're going to have to. And again, maybe they're watching it, and if they are, call me. I'd like to talk to you again. But they're not going to be able to go in there and say, well, throw that lawsuit out, which is what they want to do. If they are sitting there with 0 interviews at Sydney, and where it's till April 11th and there's no 2-0s that have been gone on, it's just not going to be defensible. So I do expect them, either that date is not going to hold. It's a rumor, or, but I can't confirm that. I just don't think, though, given the coincidental evidence we've seen with our clients getting interviews now in Johannesburg, Kathmandu and other places, that will stick.
Yeah. So exactly on topic here. Shingi is asking, and hi Shingi. I assume you're my famous Shingi from the Telegram channel. So Shingi's asking about Joburg and making the point. I mean, obviously you've got to drive the lawsuit home until it actually has produced results. You can't take a little bit of movement in Joburg or a positive rumor for Sydney and say, okay, then we're all good. You've got to continue with the lawsuits, right? So,
well, and in fact, let me just kind of, again, this is not lawyerly spin. This is just how I would argue it. The client, we had a client get an interview in Johannesburg. His number was not exactly what you'd call low. I have other clients in Johannesburg who have solid numbers. They've done all the right things. And so, yeah, you're starting to do the right thing, but you can't dole out peanuts, right? Nepal can't just do 300 or something and then they call it a day. Like, it's not going to be good enough. So I think it is a reaction, but it could be, again, you have to start somewhere, and that's where I'm taking it, right? Yeah. They're starting to understand. And again, you and I have had this conversation, but it speaks to, they cannot be where they are in June. They're going to have to do a massive ramp. And I know everyone will say, hey, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But they can't defend the numbers as they are today. They can't. Right. And so where they have capacity, Johannesburg, this big consulates, Cairo has to get off the snide.
Yeah.
For them, no, for them, like thinking of the enemy, thinking of, and I don't mean that in like they are my enemy, thinking of the government,
Okay.
like they're going to have to find places where they have capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. The
So
positive
no, I mean,
thing.
I don't have I mean, I'll give up when every single one of my clients gets an interview. That's the way I look at it. Just because, we were lucky to have 7 people get interviews last week, which is about 6 or 7% of all our clients. That's great. I love them all to death, but my job is far from over. It hasn't even started yet.
Yeah. I think people are not aware of the relatively small percentage of cases that are already current that are actually being interviewed. It's tiny percentages. It's like in Europe, I think it's about 13% or something. The numbers vary by region, but there are many more cases that need to be interviewed within the numbers that are already current. So it's a problem. And Shingi and I have had a back and forth conversation about, Shingi always says it's racism every time Europe gets some 2NLs and AF doesn't. It's not, Shingi. We've been through this before, but the positive thing is Africa is now coming up because Africa has a lot more available capacity in terms of embassies, and so you're absolutely right. They can have more embassies get in the game, particularly Sudan and Cairo. Those would make a big difference.
It's amazing. I just want to tell you, because we have so many people, and I know there's other lawsuits on the situation in Addis and Ethiopia. We had a client actually from Ethiopia get their interview in India. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I mean, it was. I'm just happy for them. I mean, it doesn't mean that, again, I want to tell everyone that, just because I'm happy for one of our clients doesn't mean that I ignore the rest of them. But I do. There's a growing recognition. I don't know if it's because of lawsuits or not, that the numbers are just too damn low, and we're going to lose. So we got to do something here because we need to walk into court soon.
Yeah. Mumbai, there's one of the users on the Telegram channel by the name of Johnny, I think it is. And he's in Mumbai, and he says there are about 30 or 40 people in Mumbai, DV cases waiting that, they've got a little community going on. And so he's aware of those cases waiting. But yeah, I'm happy that Mumbai, which wouldn't normally do a lot of DV visas, is helping out, and we need more of that. We saw the same thing in other places like Bern, for example. Bern in DV 2021 was extremely helpful to a couple of cases. Only a small embassy, but they were able to really go beyond the normal standard of helpfulness. So there are some people out there that care. There are obviously other embassies that appear not to give a damn, but there are some caring people out there, I'm sure, in some of these embassies. Okay. This is an interesting question. So this is essentially asking, is there an opportunity to join another lawsuit? And I did want to sort of clarify with the 3 sort of lawsuit, companies that I believe in, as it were, which is yourself, obviously. You've closed your lawsuit opportunity for now, right?
Yeah. We've taken on some individuals who want to be individually represented just themselves, but yeah, the group cases are closed for now. We've amended.
Yeah. Okay. So I've seen you sort of, be a little bit teased about the possibility of a future group lawsuit, but we'll see. Then Impact Team have filed their case, but they're in the period of time where they could actually add applicants, and they are, I believe, adding applicants. I want to make that clear that the Impact Team, are still onboarding some people. And then Curtis Morrison had a live chat with Raphael last week, and they've got a sort of an interest page for DV 2022 cases.
I mean,
so they will get in the fight at some point.
Yeah, I guess let me kind of explain my theory. And I put this out there at Telegram, but the way I think about it is this: number one, I have to manage my capacity and my time, because when I handle cases, it's me. I don't. And I'm there. I have to be responsive to the clients, and so I don't really ever shut out. Like, so if there's a group, and like the Sydney situation where I took a group from Sydney and I said, yeah, your consulate is not working, I've had a couple of people reach out from, Amman and maybe even a separate Cairo suit. And if I could do it so that it helps my cases and maybe shines a light on specific consulates, I'm open to that. Although I'm not looking for it. I never look for lawsuits, right? I didn't look to do DV 2022. Believe me, I never imagined I'd be in this situation. I just respond to requests and problems. And so, I was just telling you before I got on, I have an asylum interview for a former client from the Middle East who noticed that I went back to private practice, that I'm doing, I'm going to handle their asylum interview, although that's not something I generally would. So I do other things. It's not like I'm this DV lawyer. So there's other options. I do want to say, though, don't join 2 lawsuits. Please don't do that. If you're a client, I think a lot of people are confused. And they do, number one, it's unethical for lawyers to do that. And so if you are doing that, just be careful. It's not
the problem.
Yeah.
And to be clear, it's not just the lawyers saying that because they want to be in charge of the client. There's actually technical problems with that in terms of the legal position, right? So don't agree.
It's an ethical violation as far as I'm concerned.
Curtis will send me an email. I'm quite sure, if I don't correct this a little bit, Curtis and Raphael have already had a couple of lawsuits, and actually I think they've achieved some positive results. We saw some Khartoum scheduling this week, although it's not been confirmed in the data yet. But we saw a couple of things, which is clearly from, I believe, which is from one of Curtis's lawsuits. Lawsuits are causing action, that's for sure.
Yeah, and let me say, I think maybe, I don't know, people get the wrong impression. I hope it's not from me. I don't. Those other lawyers, Curtis and the Impact Group, I've worked with them. I think they've done a lot of positive things, and it's not a competition with me. I'm not in a competition for clients or a competition to be Mr. DV 2022. It's not I really just, if I think I can help, I'll help you. It's really a personal client attorney relationship with me. So I'm not, when people ask me, should I join? That's a personal decision. If you want to join someone else, have a conversation with that person. For me, I always tell people who are out there, don't take my word for it. Speak to one of our clients, they're easy to find, and and see if they like the way they're being treated and what I'm doing. Don't take my word for it.
Can I just flip that around a little bit, though? Just sort of following up on Virshan's question here. There may be some people that feel that the only options being offered out there are lawsuits, and that's not true. You can choose to not be represented on a lawsuit. That's entirely your choice, and that's a perfectly reasonable choice. But it means that you're going to be treated the way the government wants to treat you, and that is, in my opinion, they're not acting in good faith towards people. So if the government has 2 groups of people, one who are represented by a law firm and the other that are not represented by a law firm, if there's a way of helping the people with lawyers, they will do that, because that's how the legal system, that's how the system works. You can think that's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. That's what will happen, right? Now, sometimes the law firms will cause positive impact for the non-represented people. That's true. And sometimes the judges will accept requests to make a class action that would cover everybody. That's true too, but there is no action like that for DV 2022 that I'm aware of. So, you've got to make your own choices based on your own finances. If you can afford a lawyer and you want the best possible chance, then frankly, having a lawyer is probably a smart thing. But if you can't afford a lawyer, or if you're somehow disgusted by lawyers or whatever, that's fine too. Don't engage a lawyer then. And just accept that, if the government wants to screw you, they'll screw you. That's your choice, right?
Yeah, I know. Number one, I share the distrust with lawyers. I think lawyers are. I've said this before. They're like restaurants. There are some that are really good, and there are some that pretend that they're good, and the food is awful. So you have to do your homework. You have to know who you can trust and who you can't. The one thing I will say, though, is I would like nothing more than to fix the situation without lawsuits. I personally emailed the White House, people there who I know, because I used to work for the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and we have good contacts. I personally called the Department of Justice and said, let's have a conversation now, because I have a plan that would take 10 minutes. I put that in the Forbes article. So I think if you don't have the means to join a lawsuit, don't think that me personally or others who are working in this space don't want to help the entire community. That we do. And I know others that aren't litigating this also support the diversity visa process. What everyone deserves, and I've said this a couple times now, is equality of opportunity. And that's something that I actually use a lot in many other lawsuits, because that's what the law actually provides. It's equality of opportunity. And so if you have arbitrariness creep in, or this type of fast and loose with the law, meaning that, oh, now the law tells us we have to do immediate relatives first and DVs come second. That type of stuff is really wrong. I mean, it really is. And again, I'll take a minute here. I did listen in to the argument this week on the stay order before Judge Chuck, and I thought it was really below the government to, just downright distasteful to raise the situation with Ukraine and Russia, to say that's why we need to stay, because that type of after the fact arguing, number one, it's just distasteful. And I just want to say, like, I just found it disturbing, but it's something where there's a miscommunication between the public posturing by President Biden and his staff in Congress about what they want to do for diversity visas, and those that they're sending out into the field in these public court hearings where everyone can understand. And so, what they say and what they do now are two different things. And that's not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of people from abroad don't understand the political system in America either. They assume that because Biden says this is what he wants to do, that is what will happen. They don't understand how laws are made, the lack of the majority in the Senate. They don't understand the impact of those things, and so there's a messaging problem, but there's also a technical problem that Biden and the Democrats, they could say they're going to raise the number to 80,000. Doesn't mean they can. Doesn't mean they can at all.
Well, let me just put in a reason for why contact the White House. And I think it's important to understand that the State Department is an executive agency. So if President Biden wanted to change and fix DV 2020 through 2022, what he could do with a phone call, or have his staff do it, is get on the phone and say, listen, I'm looking at the monthly visa issuances, and what I said, I wanted 80,000. I know I can only get 45 or 55, 54, 850 this year. You better get on your horses and do this. And I guarantee you it would change like that. And so that's what it would take. And so for him, talk is cheap, and I think it is incumbent on the president and members of Congress who've said, no, we love the diversity visa program, we want it to work. And for them to understand that, well, then why do we only have a couple thousand issuances right now sitting here February 27th?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's have a phone call. I mean,
absolutely right. Yeah. Okay, so a couple of quick sort of updates. So what's the status of DV 2020? Yeah. So the hearing the other day was on the stay for Rye, wasn't it? So there are a bunch of appeals going through, including on the Gomez case, and Gomez and related cases, right? So we have to wait for those to play out. The funny thing in the hearing was confirmation of what we've known for a little while, which was the April 18th date. And, what's the big harm that's going to happen to the government after April 18th? The big harm, they literally are admitting, the big harm is they are going to be forced to issue some visas, and they don't want to, because, they don't want to comply with the judge's orders. Amazing. But anyway, so for people in 2020 and 2021, you have to wait for the appeals to sort of go to a certain point, And we're also waiting for this April 18th date. The April 18th date is to do with system changes that are, according to the government, necessary in order to issue visas in those cases. So after April 18th, we'll be able to sort of hopefully get some action, but it'll be, that's when it will start in terms of scheduling. Not you're not going to get a visa on April 19th. Having said that, the Rye case is important, and I think there's probably a way that a few people can take action on that, which is the DV 2021 case, and so I'll be doing a video on that in the next few days, because people need to start to get ready for that. That's a free-for-all. It's not just for named plaintiffs, so but it's only in 27 specific embassies, right? So
the one thing on the Gomez case where we're class counsel is the government did say, with or without a decision, we're going to go to the Court of Appeals and request a stay there, I think March 4th. And so what does that mean? Until the government has a stay, they are under an order to implement. And this type of, change of the system is their way of, I guess, implementing, although it's, but if they do not receive a stay, whether it's at the district court level, the Court of Appeals, or the Supreme Court, they are under order to issue 9,095 visas before October 1. And so it'll be interesting. But yeah, we don't have any further information other than they are hell-bent on getting a stay.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, quick question here. I've just read through this question. It's about a case that was processed in 2018, and then the case was erased from the SEAC system on September 26th. The erasing of a case from the SEAC system does not stop the process at the embassy, right? So that's kind of a red herring. If you were, there was a deadline of September 30th in 2018. If you weren't processed before then, it's very difficult / impossible to reopen the box, because no visa, could be issued after the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th that year. But you're focusing on the SEAC database. That SEAC database is not the whole controlling aspect of cases being processed. So you don't say why you were unfairly banned, but if it was related to the deletion of your SEAC case, that's not really an argument you can make, nor can you go back to the 2018 case. So unfortunately, Josu, in my opinion, you've got to sort of move on past that. There was the Muslim ban in place at that time, and the Muslim ban cases. There was this sort of review ordered by President Biden. And essentially, the answer from that came back that they couldn't fix it for people that were previously banned, and so there is an amendment going through, Congress, but it's not there yet. So without that, there is no way. If you were banned through the Muslim ban, there's no way to revive your case. Okay, so do you have any thoughts on that, on Josu's case there?
Yeah, it's other than it's regrettable and tragic. No, I think you hit all the high points there.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully it answers, Josu. Okay. Okay. Shady. At Shady. Okay. So Shady raised a point, I think, about this is Shady Wahab. So yeah, there were a few cases. So we know that in late December and early January, for a few days, there was a 2-week period where the resources in the KCC team that had previously been working on document procedure were brought over to work on the other processes within KCC, and they screwed some things up. One of the things they did was they sent out 2NLs to cases which were not current. And that was both because they exceeded the numbers in, for example, Africa, or they exceeded the number in Nepal and in Cairo, because those countries were limited. So it's possible that there's a case from Egypt that is not current, that is in the VB, as it were, has been scheduled. But it's also possible that that is simply a non-Egyptian case. It's possible. I don't think they're making the same mistake that they made in December and January. So, we'll have to sort of take that.
This is a question that I get from a lot of our clients, though, is, given the situation with Egypt, okay, so we have this individual in right here. His number is 12,560. Egypt, not current. How does KCC treat the processing of the 260 with those Egyptian individuals who are obviously being screwed, for lack of a better word?
They're processing them. There will be some Egyptian cases which have been processed. They don't go through the DS-260s in any way, in a smart way. So when they were doing the document procedure, they insisted on an email being sent to a certain email box with a certain subject line, and their system automatically sorted based on that subject line. With DS-260s, apparently, it seems they can't figure out what's in the DS-260 until they open it, right? They don't know which country the person is from, what chargeability the country is, they don't know anything. So they simply open the DS-260s they open them in the date that they were submitted, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean they complete the processing in the date they were submitted. They just open them. They open them, they have a look, they decide whether they need further checking or not.
So let me ask you a question. So given the situation in Cairo and Egypt in particular, would those that are still in processing, obviously the reason for that, or part of the reason for that, could be the fact that those Egyptian numbers are so are not current, or they're low because Cairo's not working, or it has nothing to do with two separate things?
Nothing to do with it. This is back to the same conversation we had earlier. Is there a feedback loop that feeds into the DS-260 processing and causes that email that says you're in processing because your embassy is not accepting? No, that's not true. It's an independent process.
It is curious, though, because we do have a number of people from Egypt who submitted their DS-260s, who are still in processing. And it seems like there's enough smoke where I'm just...
It will always seem that way. Because
I know.
There are some countries, so if you lived in Germany all your life and you're an accountant, boring job sort of thing, you've never traveled anywhere but Germany, then the government can open that case. They can use the Interpol databases to check out who you are. They can access the German records for seeing whether you've registered as married or whether you've got children or anything else. They've got very good record keeping in those countries. And so processing is very good in some countries. There are other countries, and I don't know the complete list of who is who in terms of who's got good record keeping or not, but there are some countries that either don't have good record keeping or don't make it available to the USA to look into their databases, whereas some countries, particularly in Europe, do that, right? So the smoke exists in some embassies. It doesn't mean there's truly a fire.
And it's just, I don't know, maybe I obviously have recency bias because a lot
you're getting exactly.
I'm getting heat. I'm getting a lot.
I know you are.
Distressed clients. But I will say it pisses me off personally, and this is part of the reason. And I have put this in the complaints. Cairo, if you can actually get in the door, their approval rates are like above 90%.
Yeah, they're one of the best.
You told me that they're one of the best, and so it aggravates me. Like, do you want? I guess, is there a reason why the change of position? Do you, other than they're trying to get through EB, employment base, and other immigrant visa categories?
I think that's it. It's just simply they've decided to focus on the employment categories that generate the better income, that generate more revenue for the USA, etc. To be honest, that's what it's about. It's not about. It's just a preference towards the visa types that business is screaming for. Right?
I'm going to be honest with you. In a month, I'm probably going to have to get on a plane to satisfy my clients and go to the door of the consulate and start knocking on the door, because
I'll come with you.
Yeah, people are getting. Listen. Again, we have clients in over 40 countries, but it's not. Cairo's definitely on that list of
Mr. Ambassador. Jesse and Britt Simon are outside. They want to come in.
I mean, it is a once in a lifetime opportunity, it's it's a country that has no excuse.
Yeah, no,
there are
absolutely.
some countries that quite honestly have excuses.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, Cairo's excuse I can imagine is Cairo normally do a very good volume of cases, have a very high success rate, very low refusal rate, and so that would generate an amount of work, right? To do all of those interviews that they should darn well be doing, and approving them and processing them and printing the visas and all the work that happens after the interview. All of that would generate work which would take away from family-based, which is what they're allegedly supposed to be prioritizing, and business-based, which is what they want to be prioritizing,
no doubt.
right? And so they're focusing on the other things and not little old DV.
I will say this, and I mean it. If they don't get to a 9% ratio of IVs to DVs, I just like my chances. I don't care.
Yeah,
you know, call me confident. I just don't see a reason why they can do that.
No, I agree with you. And there is so actually I want to back up a little bit to our DS260 conversation. So the next logical question that we should be asking is there time to process all the DS260s? And is it always going to be this sort of, well, you can't be scheduled because you're DS260? Is that going to continue till September? Okay, so what I want to just do is back up to what I explained earlier about a normal year. In a normal year, processing started in May and finished essentially with the backlog by December, roughly. Maybe it would drift into January sometimes, but basically by January and February, we were pretty sure that there was no more backlog, right? So that's, May to December, let's say, what call that 7 months, right? So because we know that we lost May to September of last year, we have to consider that processing effectively started on October 1, right? And so you count on 7 months from there, and that would seem to indicate that they could process all the DS260s for all the cases they needed to by May, right? And May is still enough time to schedule interviews in May, June, and July for July, August, and September. So in theory, if they simply operate the way that they have before in terms of volume, they should be able to process all the DS260s. Does that mean they will process all the DS260s? I don't know. That's a question of will, what they want to do versus what they can do, right? And again, we've had this conversation before. I talk about the processes, etc. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm talking about what will happen, which is why I don't predict things. But I can tell you there is enough time to do all the processing.
Well, I've already said, I mean, as much as I'm frustrated, I do, and I'm on record as having a base case scenario where I think we're going to see a massive ramp higher in 2NLs. I do.
We got to. Yeah,
there's no question.
I mean,
I'm not going. I mean, it's not like the world's craziest prediction, but I mean, and I'm not saying it's because they're all of a sudden turning over and saying, "Oh, we love DV." I think it's a recognition through litigation and maybe some other things that they just cannot keep these numbers so low because they're horrific.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think it's a coincidence that 7 of our plaintiffs got interviews last week. I mean, I don't, especially with some of the numbers being. I mean, we had some people who had numbers that were very high.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I agree with you. The numbers show that they did about 3,000 interviews they've scheduled 3,000 for March. And so far they've scheduled 1,500 or so, just under 1,500 for April. They better have a good week this week. They gotta go.
That number has to go above 6.
Well, so don't forget. So I think you're talking people, not cases, right?
Well, I'm talking. I'm talking
cases.
People.
Roughly a 2 to 1. Okay, so 3,000 interviews is 6,000 people almost.
Yeah.
So in March they are interviewing 6,000 people roughly. In April, I believe they should exceed that number. They should do more than 3,000. I would like to see them do 4,000, although that would take embassies like Cairo getting into the game.
Well, let me give you a theory. Let me give the audience a theory. And again, I'm not out here. There's enough people on Twitter who are now experts on war theory and what's going on in Europe, and I'm not one of them. But I will say, how does it affect the DV? So we're going to have an impact at consulates in Europe, especially those around the region in Warsaw and others. And so if the State Department sees the numbers and they see a lawsuit and they say, okay, how do we fix this? Well, and I'm making a prediction. Okay. They'll say, well, let's get Cairo into the game. Let's get Sydney into the game, or the OC region. What can we do? You know, we have Mumbai, maybe, who can take some capacity, and Joburg. And we've already seen kind of Johannesburg get off the snide a little bit. But I do think they have to, it's, you know, South America, right? We have some Montreal. They're going to have to find spots that are clean, meaning they're not impacted.
Right.
And they can take it. The other thing I'll say with Ukraine.
You're an optimistic person, Jesse. You're a very optimistic.
I am. No, you know what it is? I mean, I'm thinking if I were the government, which I was, I would, and I had to defend a lawsuit. I want to win, right? I want to win. So how do I win? I have to make it seem like I'm not as evil as maybe we are. And so what I would say is, give me 300 cases in Cairo, get Ethiopia going. Hey, Ghana, let's go, you know, other places. And the other thing I'd say, you know, and it goes to, I do have some clients from Ukraine, and I'm extremely sympathetic to what's going on there, but I'm not going to talk about it because that's not me. It's not what I do. But I will say, anyone who was lucky enough to get out of the Ukraine and come to the United States, I don't care what visa you're on, you can apply for adjustment of status. I've had a couple of people I just want to make that point, because I do think that your intent unquestionably has to change. And so if you came in with non-immigrant intent, well, you know, that certainly has changed. And I know I have clients in that situation, but I wanted to point that out. And I want to back up maybe and explain for those who haven't watched the previous video, because one of the things that Visa Bulletin did was make a lot of people current who are now maybe in the United States, who now, depending on what visa you have, if you have a visa that has dual intent, meaning you can hold two positions in your head at once. I want to immigrate, I want to get a green card, and I want to go home. That's non-immigrant intent. You have the opportunity to file for adjustment of status, and you should do so, as far as I'm concerned. The other thing is, for those who...
That would be H1s, L1s, O1s. I think those, right? Yep.
And you know, and there are others who maybe are here traveling, who may look home and see a region in Europe, or maybe some, you know, civil strife otherwise, who can change an intent can change. They don't hold you to your intent. There are certain periods of time, 60 days, it's kind of an unwritten rule at this point, where, you know, they'll distrust whether you actually changed your intent. Meaning, when you come in on a non-immigrant visa, let's say a tourist visa, you're telling the government, I intend to go back. I have no immigrant intent. If you turn around the next day and file for a green card as evidence of your immigrant intent, they can find you ineligible and inadmissible for life because you made a misrepresentation with your intent. However, your intent can change. You can come in and say, I made it here, I'm looking at the situation, and I've decided to apply for adjustment of status. And, you know, maybe you want to get an attorney for sure, but that is something where that's an option. And I think it's actually a good option for this year, where there are a number of consulates, for whatever reason, maybe there's civil strife, maybe they're closed, and maybe now there's this regional conflict in Europe that would cause you to do that.
I agree with you. And so you mentioned about Ukrainians. We should really be expanding that perspective of a change of mind to really anyone in sort of Eastern Europe, or you know, even central to Eastern Europe. You know, Vienna consulate just announced that because of the problems in Ukraine and the impact on Warsaw and everything else, that they were canceling, that they were not going to be doing any further work, and that they were instead sort of diverting their resources to helping out. Right now, so in that case, if you're here in the USA and you were thinking you were going to go home to Vienna for your consular processing interview for DV, and Vienna has just announced that they're basically not going to take any more appointments, then you've got a perfect reason to say, well, that was because of the war that's happening in Eastern Europe. There's an impact on me, even though I've never been to Ukraine or Russia, because my embassy said so, right? And so that would be the reasoning behind your change of mind. So, you can't necessarily do that in Sydney, but you can definitely do that in somewhere in Eastern Europe, I would have thought. So
one thing for Australia is a lot of those people who come in on E3 visas, because there's a particular relationship with. I do actually think that you could come here, and I've been here for the last 6 months, and you could watch the, lack of a better word, shit show in Sydney and say they closed. They don't let anyone transfer their cases. I would like nothing more to go home and see mom and dad, but and do my interview and come back with my green card. But you know what? I'm going to change my intent now.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, 100%. I thought you said Sydney, they couldn't do it. I was just saying.
No, I was saying, sorry, that was clumsy. I was saying that in Sydney, they couldn't refer to the Eastern European problems, right?
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right about, Sydney, in particular, if you're here on an E3, or even if you're coming on an E3, wait some time, sure. But if you're faced with the legitimate, look, I really was planning to go home to Sydney to do my consular processing interview, but Sydney, are putting out these bloody rumors. They're not giving any straight dates, so I'm changing my mind. That's perfectly legitimate. But again, not the next day after arriving, right? Not the next day. You've got to wait a little bit of time.
I know people like to call me, or maybe I don't know, maybe they chirp me or not. I'm not coaching people. What I'm telling you is I'm providing an option for those, because a lot of times people don't even know about adjustment of status. And I've had a number of people watch these videos who now say, oh, wait a minute, I'm in the US. I didn't know about this. And in fact, I can't go home. I was actually struggling with how to do it. Now, the one thing, we should give the audience kind of that list of, well, now you can't come here. You have to come here. You have to stay in the United States if you actually pursue adjustment status. If you're on, or you were on a kind of non-work authorization visa, like a B1, you can't just start getting a job. You have to make sure you can provide for yourself. Again, but I will say USCIS has found, we've said this before, they have a very strong process for targeting diversity visa applicants for an interview on or before September. Even if you file, I've said June, I know you said later, but I like to be a little bit more conservative.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I get the angry emails like, hey, I haven't got an interview date. And I'm like, well, we just got a receipt. So hold on.
Oh, and it's a panicky process. I've been there. I mean, I remember there's an account of my 90-minute InfoPass appointment in San Francisco in 2014 when I knew the bloody system inside out, and the first thing the IO, a senior IO, said to me was, oh no, you can't adjust status on a DV. You've got to go back to your home country. And I'm just like lost my mind at that point. And for 90 minutes, I was explaining to this poor woman about, no, that's not how it works.
Absolutely. And I think too, I think it does speak, your own personal circumstances. You actually have walked in the shoes of those out there that are going through this kind of just torturous process. And I live it. But I can't have experienced it like you did. The one thing I do say to people, and maybe it will help the audience, but I've said it and I'll say it again, is, the one thing you can control, prepare for your interview like it's tomorrow. I know people say, oh, I've already heard that. But no, seriously, like, know where you're going to get your medicals. Get all your documents together. If you just got married or have had a baby, make sure you have the proof of that. Make sure you're prepared to talk to the consulate about that. If you had a prior conviction, maybe write down, what changed for you. But you can prepare.
Yeah, exactly. I want to demonstrate. I'm going to move on to another question, but I want to demonstrate. I want to demonstrate what you were saying earlier with this particular question. This one's about Frankfurt. It doesn't really matter which one we demonstrate, but I just want to show what you were trying to explain earlier. So this is the grateful to Noyan from Save Diversity Visa for this visualization. This is the capacity of various issued visas at various embassies around the world. So what I tend to do is I switch to immigrant and I look up the post and say, okay, how many immigrant visas can my post do normally, and what are they doing now, right? And so we only have the numbers up until December, but who are we looking at? Frankfurt, FGH, right? So Frankfurt. So for immigrant visas, pre-pandemic, they were doing about 120 to 140 on average, right? Of those visas, you can see that, for example, if I just pick a month, these cases were DV1s, these are DV2s, and they're DV3s. So they had a total of 18, 20, about 40 cases out of 140 were typically, the sort of the volume of DV visas to the volume now. Now they're back to, you can see they're back to almost normal volume. They did 120 immigrant visas in December, but they're not doing, DV at that point, right? And so the question you now have to do is to look at, okay, how many are they doing at this point? This is how you work out the whole thing. You then go to either the Save Diversity site or it's Arthesius' site, one of these sites, and you look up Frankfurt, okay, and say, okay, well, what are they? How many cases have they got now, right? So they've got some from Africa. This is Africa. This is the Asia region. Let's go back to Africa. Yeah, so they've got, this is Africa. So Frankfurt have taken 5 cases from Africa, 7 from Asia. Doesn't matter where they're from really, but 55 from Europe and 1 case probably from OC. Yeah. So they've got something like 70 cases for the first 3 months of the year. This is up to the end of March. So you compare the amount of work they're doing now and in March to their normal capacity. That's how you answer that question, Chewy. This is what Jesse mentioned earlier, right? So that you go through that process. I did a whole video explaining that a couple of weeks ago, but that was roughly the process. Okay. All right. So that's that question. Let's just see. Can an embassy accept case transfers? However, it can't interview all DV winners who choose this embassy. This is back to what you were saying earlier about people transferring. There's people who sort of see their embassy not doing much, which may be normal. It may be normal that their particular embassy doesn't do much, right? You need to know how much they're doing in comparison to normal and whether they're working on other immigrant visas in comparison to normal. But based on that assessment, they're like, okay, I want to jump to this other embassy. People always wanted to jump to Cairo in previous days because Cairo had a high approval rate, right? And would do lots of processes. But you can't just jump around to any embassy you want because some of the embassies are restricting who can be interviewed there based on residency, local residency. There may also be difficulties with traveling to that location. There may be difficulties with being in that location for long enough to have your medical in that location, stay there for the interview, and then stay there for maybe several weeks while they approve your case after the interview, right? You won't get your passport back, so you can't leave, right? So it's not as easy as you think, and you need to consider all those factors, even if KCC and the embassy agreed to it, which they won't in all cases.
And I gotta add in there that, if you're putting a reason in an email to KCC that's not true,
yeah,
like you moved and you didn't, and you're really just staying in a hotel or something, that could disqualify you at the interview because they're going to say like, and remember,
material misrepresentation.
If you're not in your home country, I don't know, again, I've always been one to say, I like my home court. I like to, if I can, I get my home court. They're not going to approve everyone. Someone's going to get disqualified, and consular officers have an incredible amount of discretion to deny anyone they feel like doing. And there's always a bad apple in the bunch. So if they suspect that you game the system, again, I think you just have to have a really good reason, be honest, and prepare.
Yeah, exactly. Estelle's raising an interesting point here. The fear on not joining the lawsuit is hearing the words, if you did not join the lawsuit, the chance is over, like previous years. So just to clarify that, in DV 2020, thanks to the class action of Gomez, for which Jesse was the lead counsel on that class action, and the other lawsuits that were sort of combined with that, everybody who was not issued a visa in DV 2020 is covered by the class action, but there's a reservation for 9,000 visas, 9,095, right? So not everybody can be served by that, but everybody was sort of represented by a class. In DV 2021, you were you either had an individual case or you were in the Go lawsuit or the Good Luck lawsuits, which are still being run through the appeals. Go won, Good Luck will win, and the appeals will happen on both of those cases, right? There's also the Rye case. The Rye case reserved 966 visas for issuance in 27 embassies, and that was a class. And so you didn't have to be a named plaintiff in the Rye case in order to benefit from Rye. Outside of that, this statement is true. If you didn't join one of those lawsuits, right, then your chance is over. That is the reality. And that's the reality every year. You heard the question earlier, Estelle, from the guy in 2018. The reason that the 2018 case can't be helped fundamentally is that the fiscal year ended. And so without reservation, your chances are over. If you don't get a visa before then.
And again, this is not, I know everyone wants to beat up lawyers sometimes, but it also speaks to the courage of plaintiffs. I mean, the reason they benefit individually is because they're the ones who actually are putting their names on the paper and saying, you harmed me and, Your Honor, make me whole. And that's why they benefit. And someone who is not named in that plaintiff, the judge cannot make someone whole who didn't have the courage to come forward. And again, how I feel about my clients. I love them all to death, and I respect them for their courage, and that's why they should benefit. And I have no sympathy, that I can't help others because they're the ones who step forward. So unless it's a class action, that's absolutely true. I do want to say one more thing about Gomez. I'm not the Gomez. We had an incredible team on that. So I know everyone wants to put me maybe at the front of the list, but we had the people from Mayor Brown and Justice Action Center and Innovation Law Lab, along with my role at AILA. We really combined to do what we were compelled to do. So
yeah, absolutely. No, and I really appreciate what you did in that year. I actually looked back the other day to our earliest emails, you and I, which I think was in May of that year, or April or May of that year.
Well,
yeah.
And again, I know we're probably running over, but to the extent people are interested, that lawsuit actually was not just diversity visas. That we lost. We brought classes for immigrant visas, non-immigrant visas, and then diversity visa individuals who were all banned from because of Trump's immigrant visa ban and non-immigrant visa ban.
Right.
It just so happened that we only won for diversity visas. And the reason we won for the diversity visas and not those other classes, and we actually were the first one to actually explore this inability for the Department of State to have a no visa policy. They can't do that, right? But the reason we won for diversity visas and not for immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas is because the judge recognized our argument that diversity visas are just absolutely going to be screwed because of the deadline. And I think that's an important point that the Department of State has failed to understand, that the deadline means something. It means Congress intended good faith efforts to issue the capacity. Doesn't mean that they have to reach the capacity, but you have to make a good faith effort. And that's not happening for this year. And it hasn't happened for many years now.
Right. Okay, couple more quick questions then. This is a classic one. You haven't mentioned Ghana for the last 10 minutes, so therefore you've forgotten us.
I did.
I think you did actually
I
just about
did.
5 minutes ago.
Believe me, I know that the one I didn't mention today, all the clients I have from wherever that will be, I actually have written down.
Yeah.
No, I totally I
Yeah.
have a couple clients from like Madrid, and they'll be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
what's up?"
Yeah.
And no, I can't win. The thing
There's
about
no
it is,
favoritism. It's not.
I can't win until I win for everyone, and I know
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
and I take that responsibility. I understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and same for me. It's not that I've forgotten Ghana, Stephen. There's many embassies, and yours is one of the ones in trouble, and we're aware of that.
Another thing though, I did feel to mention though, and I know Curtis has a lawsuit as well as our lawsuit with Khartoum, and we did see some wiggle room there. I mentioned Johannesburg, but Khartoum this week, did see kind of I think I don't know how many interviews ended up getting sent out.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers yet because they've not accepted any of the cases in SIAC. So we can't see. There are some in transit, which we assume to be to Khartoum, but we don't know the number that Khartoum have taken yet.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll adjust that on Monday or Tuesday.
Positive step, though. Positive.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and it's credit to Curtis on that one. I think that's great. I'm sure
we have a couple clients there that are definitely
it could be your lawsuit
happy.
too.
Yeah, but I think and again, it speaks to why multiple lawsuits can work, and why I don't want to. I don't disparage.
Yeah, you're attacking embassies from multiple lawsuits. It doesn't mean you can be in multiple lawsuits. Shady asked that question again.
And sometimes it's about, we see this in all types of immigration related litigation where someone files a lawsuit, then other people file, and people say, well, why would you do that if there's, it's because sometimes it takes a couple for them to wake up and see the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so definitely Shingi's going to be hosting you when you go to Johannesburg.
Yeah, I'll go to Joburg. I gotta. Well, it's funny because the client, God willing, if he gets his interview, I may travel back with him once he comes to the United States and goes back. So no, again, we got a lot of work to do.
Last question here then. Is my case strong if I join a lawsuit on the ground that KCC replies to my email with a relevant message, even though my email mentioned all the data? So if they make a mistake, is that grounds to sue them?
No, I mean, again, it speaks to, number one, it's a recognition of the frustration with, I have people who've literally sent KCC an email every single day. Yeah. And they're like, why aren't you getting them to respond to me like me? And I'm saying they're not going to respond to you. Like, and my response is what I filed with the court. I've taken action. You've taken action. You don't need to send any more emails because you've basically told a federal court against the KCC that they've not done right by you.
Right.
Okay. Another email is not gonna, again, maybe they respond, maybe they don't. But I think it goes back to this. I'm in this panic mode. I want to grab onto something. It takes me 2 minutes to send an email to the KCC. And maybe they do something.
Yeah, but people have got to understand these are humans we're talking to, right? So imagine if somebody asked you a question, every day this week, and asked you again the same question today. You're going to get pissed off, and if you have any power to respond to being pissed off because that person's a pain in the ass, then you're going to wield that power at some point, right? So if you constantly annoy the ladies at KCC. Don't be surprised when they take your file and put it to the bottom of a pile of papers. That's what's going to happen because you're pestering the life out of them. Just leave it to Jesse, and let Jesse do his stuff. If you're on the lawsuit, if you're not, then don't be writing to KCC every bloody day. It doesn't help you or them, right? So
and again, we've actually developed this frequently asked questions for our clients. It was through a client he created it. The guy is absolutely amazing. He's he should probably be paid. But I think it's also important to recognize that if I'm a lawyer and I'm suing the KCC, they're a represented party. So I really shouldn't be engaging with the KCC. unless if it's unrelated to the litigation, and it may be, but I would have to file a notice of appearance with them. I'm supposed to communicate with their lawyers because they're represented. So my communication would really go to the Department of Justice and not the KCC. And in fact, when you have this, one of the things litigation can do, it actually provides you access way more so than you never get through an email to the KCC, because they're going to know your name, they're going to know your number, they're going to know where you stand. And if we ever get to a point where we're engaging with them, and again, they're going to respond in our lawsuits in April, that's how we can do this. But again, I do appreciate the kind of dilemma or the mind, whatever you want to say, that you wake up to every day, when it's just like Groundhog Day, in the sense that, like, oh, I didn't get a response. Cairo's not doing anything. Accra's not doing anything. It's almost March, and there still says I'm processing. I submitted it in May. What's going on?
Right.
And my answer is the same. I wish I don't know. If I knew, it wouldn't be arbitrary.
Right. Last question, or last thing from me, really, Jesse. Is it possible for you to sort of document or detail which embassies are already covered by plaintiffs, or is that not helpful in your mind? So, for example, somebody asked about, have you got any plaintiffs in Ghana, or this other place, or whatever. It would be helpful to say, oh well, look, Jesse's already got 2 people at we don't need to know the numbers, but are you already sort of attacking embassy X?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I can tell you, I mean, we do know that we have a list. Number one, I can't do it off the top of my head, but we have actually Excel sheets where actually everyone in our lawsuit knows. I can say that I believe we had 38 or so. I mean, but most of those that made it to your list are certainly represented. So Addis, Khartoum, Joburg, Sydney is a separate issue, Amman, Abu Dhabi, Ankara, I think anywhere in the Middle East, the MENA region. It's
really for non-plaintiffs though. So plaintiffs have that information, but non-plaintiffs, non-clients of yours, probably need to be aware. Okay, am I being represented by Jesse, or is that embassy being attacked, or is the impact team taking it, or who's actually attacking the embassy?
That's a really good point. Number one, we didn't name the embassies. We didn't think that was. It's just a tactical decision on my part. I'm always happy. If someone wants to know if I have a client from a particular region, you can always find me on Telegram or Twitter, and I'll let you know. The reason I don't release a lot of the information about the clients and where they're from is because I'm hell-bent on keeping their privacy private and their confidential information away from others. So, but if you want to know, hey, do you have any plaintiffs from X? I'll be responsive to that, and I will respond. I've never, ever ignored a message. So, and I won't. So yeah, but it's important. I would say between the 3 individuals, I mean,
we're happy now.
They're pretty much all covered, I would say. I can't imagine anyone's been left off the mark. And again, here's the other thing, and I think you made this point too. I think what we're going to see, though, is we're going to see shifts. So maybe things that embassies that were working well early are not maybe have to be put on that yellow flag later, right? And again, it speaks to the timing. It's February 27th. Both of us expect a major ramp. If it doesn't, it makes the visa bulletin look like a complete fraud. And I do think for those numbers to actually have any meaning, that we'll see this major ramp, and maybe some of the ones that were on that list will have a need to wake up because there are now new threats to the numbers in other regions.
Yeah, exactly.
And the last point I'll make is, if you're in the United States and you have a reason for your intent to change and you're current, think about your options to adjust status.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
very good. All right, Jesse, thank you for taking so much time this morning. It's been a long session, but but I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I listen. I learn more from you than I'm just here. I'm like one of the audience members, and so I'm going to tell everyone to be nice to Simon though on the telegrams. You know, you can get frustrated. You can get frustrated with the State Department, but you can't get frustrated with Mr. Simon. He's doing this out of the goodness of his own
Simon
heart.
fights back, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I know.
And
right?
I try and be a better person, Jesse. I try and follow your example, but some people just,
Yeah, I'll leave everyone with this. You know, I wasn't always so calm, but I have a 6-year-old daughter who absolutely, it's like those telegram messages that are the same question over and over. And by 6 o'clock at night, you know, I start to get a little heated, but it's so the telegram messages for me are easy. Those are the softballs. She's the difficult one. So, but anyway, I hope this was helpful. We'll see you maybe next week. Okay.
Yep. Very good.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.